Hi, Contessas. Welcome to the Career Contessa podcast, your shortcut to being more fulfilled, healthy, and successful at work. I'm your host, Lauren McGoodwin. And today we're back with our first 30 and 30 of the new year, where we bring you three tangible tips in 30 minutes that you can implement in your career right now. My co host for this series is Marnie Lamonic, a career coach and a regular on the podcast.
Hi, everyone. In today's 3 and 30, we are diving into one of my personal favorite episodes, which is 2026 workplace predictions. Let's do a quick catch up before we get into the meaty stuff because Lauren and I haven't been together on the pod for a minute since December was a solo episode. And Lauren, I know we're recording this just ahead of the new year, so fill us in on how the end of 2025 is shaking out for you.
I love this end of season, mostly because I always take the 2 weeks off between Christmas and New Year's. And, I started doing that before kids. With kids, I think it's just necessary because they're out of school. But I love this season because I feel like it's the one time where you can take time off of work. And a lot of people are taking time off. So you don't come back to just like a mad rush. So it really feels like you're disengaged. And I feel like that's exactly what I needed. Kind of end of the year reflection time to zone out. I just like realized there's not enough moments of that because the days and the weeks are just so overscheduled. So we're wrapping up the year by we're spending the holidays at home, and then we're gonna meet our family in Palm Springs to do New Year's, which will be really fun. I have this rule, people with young kids maybe have this too, where we can go anywhere that's within a 2 hour driving radius
Mhm.
right now. So but what are you doing? I'm sure your plans are so much more exciting. So let me live vicariously through you.
No, I love that for you. I just plus one to the slowing down around the holidays and how nice it feels. It's funny because we're recording this the very beginning of December, and I feel like on social media and stuff, I already see people talking about the new year. Like, I feel like there's this collective desire to already pause and reflect and get ahead of it a little bit, which I've certainly felt as well. I will just be with family for the holidays. I have family in both Oklahoma and Florida, so I'll be bopping between those two places. But I am officially doing Costa Rica in January, which
Nice.
Lauren, I haven't gotten Airbnb to sponsor me yet, but I should hit them up before I finalize my accommodations because the dates have been set. So that'll be fun for one of our future recordings. I can report live from there.
Yeah, oh, that's so fun.
Yeah.
I love how my location never changes and yours has changed multiple times. It just really, I think, is a real um like visual illustration of where we are in our life. Like for
Totally fair.
me, consistency is better. I know I always feel so fortunate that I work from home because I'm like I can't even imagine that. But I also again like very much in the thick of it, kids' school schedules, things like that. But I will say you don't get to experience the high that comes from dropping your kids off at school. It's like that is
Oh.
a good feeling every day. So yeah, I don't have much to report. The podcast will continue in 2026. For those of you that are regular listeners. And I absolutely love this episode because I always feel like it's a good way to either end the year or start the year. It's just sort of predictions. And I just want everybody to know, like, you can do this for like your own career too. These are just sort of predictions that people have made about like the career landscape in general. But I always think it's kind of fun to make some predictions or manifestations, probably a better word when you're doing it personally for your own career as well. So we've got some good episodes coming up that will help with that stuff, but just wanted to plant the seed. Like I absolutely believe in that kind of stuff. So if you're trying to make your own predictions or manifestations for your 2026, do it. I highly recommend it. It like literally works. So okay, I'll pass it over to you. So I stop rambling. We can move on to the meaty stuff.
No, I love it. Yeah, this episode, like Lauren already said, is a favorite for both of us. I think one, because it's fun to think about what the year could hold, but the other element is always looking back and seeing how our predictions actually shook out. So if you did not listen to the 2025 work predictions episode, we'll throw that in the show notes. But to bring you up to speed, our three predictions were AI education will become crucial at all levels. That's a little obvious, but correct. Workplace flexibility will remain the paramount candidate expectation. And third, there will be an increasing focus on EQ in leadership roles. So I
And
think
EQ
these,
is emotional intelligence, just for those of you who didn't know.
yes, thank you. And I think these all definitely played out to a certain extent, but the one that I felt did not come to fruition as much and I was a little surprised about was the workplace flexibility. This may just be the group of people that I work with as a career coach, but I've seen a lot less people tied to strictly remote work. And I've even had clients that have been remote and they're like, you know what? I'm open to being in an office, at least hybrid. I kind of miss the community
Yeah.
aspect. So that has fallen a little bit more by the wayside from my point of view. But obviously, Lauren, like we talked about at the top, you're in a different life season. I feel like when you're a working mom, the flexibility is a little bit more important. So I'm curious how you view that one in particular.
I'm actually not shocked by this because I do think it's like the pendulum swung too far one direction of COVID, of like everybody was working from home, everything was remote. And I do think in most things in life, like there's a happy medium. So I totally understand why people like hybrid. There is an energy boost that comes from being in person also, and like being in an office, like getting dressed and kind of like having that ritual of the commute. Like my husband doesn't work fully remote, and I don't think he ever could. Like he would absolutely hate that. Whereas like and again, maybe this is a life stage thing where I'm like, I'm so grateful that I work remote, but I also have a love-hate relationship with work travel. Like because I'm fully remote, it means that I do need to travel a little bit more often than maybe I would if I was in a hybrid role, which I think is really interesting just because there's a part of that that I really love, but there's also a part of that where I'm like, this is harder logistically and takes more away and I seem to always be putting myself in that weird spot of like the mom guilt. So it's like booking the 5 a.m. flight when you're like, oh, that's going to be so terrible. You're not going to sleep at all the night before because you're worried you're going to miss the flight. So I actually agree. I'm not shocked that people are open to, I think everybody wants flexibility, or I think what everybody really wants is autonomy. They want autonomy to make their own schedule or be able to work from home on a day where they've got 4 doctor's appointments and but they can work in between or whatever like that. So I'm not shocked that people aren't saying if it's not fully remote, take it off the list. I would not be, but I would be shocked, I should say, if people were like, yeah, I'll go back to being in office 8:30 to 5 every day where you tap me on the shoulder at noon if I haven't gone to lunch. Like I think people like flexibility. I think that's kind of the keyword, or the keyword also being autonomy. They want to be able to have some say. That makes total sense to me. And I remember when I first started working at Hulu, I had been in this like very strict work environment where it was 8:30 to 5. When I got to Hulu, it was really flexible. And like that was before I even had kids. And I just remember loving it. And I think there's like an employer trust that goes with that. So it's like you communicate so much more. So I think that's the key here, less that, okay, I'm only going to look for something that's fully remote. I think people are open to, you know, other things too.
Yeah, and that's such an insightful point about the trade-offs, even when you are fully remote, that maybe you then have to travel more. It's not like everything is strictly just pros.
Yeah. And working from home is not for everybody. Like it does take a certain discipline. I think as a working mom, it's like I'm juggling so many things at once that I'm a hyper multitasker. And so it's like and I'm like super disciplined because I'm like my whole life has to, or like my whole workday has to fit within these few hours. So I have to be really efficient. I'd probably be like that if I was in an office too. It's just nice that I don't have to waste the time on a commute. I can be doing other things, which is like part of a bigger conversation of like, most women are working more hours outside of the home than they ever did before, and yet they're still doing it just as much. So like that's a whole other different conversation, but I appreciate that I don't have to spend 2 hours commuting like I did before, like this job, COVID, I should say, really.
Yeah, totally. No, we could talk about that for a while, but should we go into our first predictions? We have a lot
Yes,
to
yes.
say. Okay, I'll let you kick it off with our first one.
Okay, our first prediction for 2026 is that the job market will not feel all that different, which I know this is maybe not the most surprising prediction of all time. And maybe it feels like the past few years have already been full of extreme change. So while 2026 may not be calm, it's just not likely to feel that noticeably different. This prediction comes from Indeed's 2026 US Jobs and Hiring Trends report, which has the very fitting title, quote, how to find stability in uncertainty. So we'll link to that article and all the research from that research in the episode show notes. But while no change isn't necessarily good news, I know sometimes you're like, okay, the last few years have been really hard, so I actually want to hear that it's going to change. I think that there just doesn't seem to be this larger. Or let me start over. While no change isn't necessarily good news, since we all know the past few years have been tough, there does seem to be a larger acceptance around this new normal that we've been adjusting to really since I would say like I don't know, after the golden years of like whenever the power shifted from employees really back to employers. So what was that like 2022, 2023? So Indeed specifically described the 2026 job market as modest job growth, moderate employer caution, and hiring patterns that feel more familiar than chaotic. So if you don't like chaos, you're happy about that. If you've been dying for a change, I'm sorry. I don't think 2026 is the year that things are going to change drastically, but it also means that we're sort of riding a wave that we know. So there's some comfort in that. So let's break down what this all actually looks like if you plan to job search in 2026. Number one, don't wait for a perfect moment to make a move. If you've been holding out for a better job market, you may end up waiting another year or two. If you're ready to start job searching or exploring something new, just start the process whenever it makes sense for your life rather than to time the job market, right? Like trying to time anything is really, really challenging. Number two, nail your qualifications in a clear and succinct way. The more competitive the job market, the more important it is for you to quickly articulate why you're the strongest candidate. I actually can plus one to this because I've been doing interviews for a different role at Atlassian, and I can just tell you, I just finished interviewing 5 people for the same role. It was insane to me the difference of the person who stood out so clearly. I could follow what they were saying. It was succinct and it made sense. I cannot emphasize this tip enough. How challenging it is to follow people sometimes. So whether it's your resume, your LinkedIn, or just like the way you talk about your work, the quicker someone understands what you're great at, the better. And then number three, don't count out internal opportunities for growth. So while we're never going to tell you not to job search, I do want to share a friendly reminder that sometimes the growth or challenge you're looking for can happen internally at your company. You can job search within your own company, and sometimes, especially in competitive job markets, that's better. So if you love your culture and you love your teammates, there could be value in exploring internal mobility opportunities rather than focusing on completely, jumping ship and starting over. Now, sometimes it's simply time to leave. You're going to have to make the call and go with your own gut because you'll really know. But there are other times where you're like, I've outgrown this team, but that team is a really good fit for me for where I want to go next in my career. I also feel this way about informational interviews. Like if you are trying to, or just like networking, if you're trying to grow your network, and that's a goal in 2026, start with networking within your own company and then start exploring outside opportunities. You can make a lot more headway doing that internally than sometimes external. And it can kind of give you that confidence boost to stick with the external outreach because I know that that can be a little tough if you're not if you're not hearing back. So that rounds out prediction number one.
I'm personally excited to hear that there's maybe less chaos. I don't know anyone who's like maybe more chaos in 2026
Well,
would be
no, we don't want more, but we're sort of like, can we go? I mean, I think everybody would love for there to be a little bit more quote employee power or like, there was a time in 2020, 2021, sometime around there where like you could sneeze and get a job, and it does not feel that way anymore. I just overheard someone at a coffee shop talking about how their boyfriend got laid off and he's been looking for a job, and it's like it's just been so hard. And it's like I feel like that story could be told a million different ways. And so I think that people would love for it to not feel so hard and so long. And like just the idea of finding a new job feels like this overwhelming weight that's coming on you. I do wish we could soften that for people a little bit, but I don't think this is the year for that, unfortunately.
I'm hopeful January is going to be brighter. January of 2025 was kind of odd, so we'll see where we're shaking out by the time this episode airs.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, our second prediction is values alignment will become incredibly important to job seekers. And so this is a similar flavor to the 2025 prediction about workplace flexibility, but it's more focused on values alignment in particular. And it comes from a Forbes article that we will also link in the show notes that really focuses on job seekers prioritizing values alignment as part of the search. And values alignment, as Forbes describes it, is proof that the company's values actually show up in decisions, policies, leadership behavior, and the employee experience. from my own perspective, I would take this one level deeper and say that candidates are becoming more mission driven or maybe more mission conscious is a better way to put it than ever. I keep joking that everyone says they want a work culture that is quote unquote not toxic. Feels like the bar's on the floor.
Yeah.
But I'm also hearing more and more the desire to make a positive impact on the world with work. And if you're thinking, no duh, haven't we all always felt that way? Oddly enough, there hasn't been as much of a focus from my coaching, at least the past few years on that as I've seen over the last few months. I don't know if it's like a function of the world and where we've gotten to, but people are really starting to hyper focus on the mission piece in particular.
I'm
And
curious,
so, yeah.
sorry, just to jump in. When people are working with you as a coach, what does it sound like when they say that? Are they like, I'm job searching and I want to go work somewhere where I like the place? Or like, I feel like I get this, but I'm very curious how people say it to you or word it to you.
Yeah, there's a few different versions of it, I would say, in terms of how it manifests or comes to life. So, the first version, which I would honestly say is the most rare, is when someone has like a mission that they're really passionate about. And they're like, all right, I come from education. I want to have a positive impact on the youth in some way in my future career.
Gotcha.
That's a lot more rare than you would think. I think people all seem to have the idea that everyone else feels that way, but a lot of us are not that clear on like a single mission, and that's okay. The more common one I'm hearing is I just want to feel good about the end result that my work is having. So it doesn't have to be something I'm super passionate about. Like I don't have to be obsessed with the industry, but I do want to feel like at the end of the day, I'm making someone's life better. So even if I'm working at a software company and it's software for lawyers that's helping them track their hours better. That came up the other day. Like, I'm not necessarily overly passionate about that, but I can see how I'm improving someone's life and having a net positive impact versus something that's at odds with their own personal values.
Yeah, I was gonna say like they don't want to work for some evil company that is you know, helping teens be addicted to the internet or something like that. We won't name the company that does that, but I have a friend that used to work there. That was how she described that place. So I
Funny.
get it now.
Yes, totally. And I'll say too, just like as a caveat to all that, it's all of it is in the framing. Like what you view as like a net positive or a net negative is
Right.
personal. So yeah, it's not like there's like a right or wrong way to do it, but I've also seen more of a concern on leadership actually emulating the values. And so
Interesting.
I wanted for the tactical tips for this one to talk about how to suss out the values of a company, and also be prepared to speak to them if you're a leader or a hiring manager. Because as a career coach who works with people on the job search, I am definitely helping people craft very specific answers to get to the core of how are you actually walking the walk
Yeah.
of these values that you have on your website. So let's start with the leaders and or the hiring managers. Be prepared to answer questions like, how does your team hold leadership accountable? What's one recent decision that reflects the company's stated values? It's a personal favorite of mine. How does the organization support psychological safety? That last one's a little like Gen Z modern, but you can see how there's a wide spectrum of where we could go with this. There's not necessarily a perfect way to answer these questions. I'll just say two, but as a rule of thumb, if you're a leader getting any flavor of these questions, keep your statements direct, don't beat around the bush, and focus on positivity when you can. If there's room for growth culturally, especially if you're in a hiring position, you don't need to air all the dirty laundry to the candidate, but you also don't need to bold-faced lie. There's a fine balance to be had. I've had some people interview recently where answers to cultural questions are almost like a little bit too honest. And I
Mm.
think we have this sense sometimes as leaders of if I'm not completely clear about the exact landscape of what's going on, then I'm lying. But I also don't think you need to overshow your cards. Like, if there's room for growth, you can say it a little bit, but you don't need to be so in the weeds about it because you also don't want to scare someone off. I hope I'm making sense with how I'm articulating this because I'm not telling you to lie again, but you don't need to air all that dirty laundry again to someone who doesn't know you.
Yeah, I think one of the best ways you can do it is give an example. So, like, if you share something and then you're like, here's an example of what that looks like in the workplace or how it plays out, I think it really helps illustrate what you're trying to say without confusing the person even more. I think the thing about values questions too, when people ask them, is it always feels very abstract. Like, again, I've been doing a bunch of interviews and people will ask me, and like, look, Atlassian like puts, communicates the values, it's published online, like anyone can find it, but it will be like, play as a team is one of the values. And an example could be like, give me some examples of how you guys play as a team, or like, I saw that you're like, these are your values, which one is your favorite, or something like that. Like, um, also, whenever you are prepping for questions to ask in an interview, one, you can always go to Career Contessa. We have tons of questions, but I love to get ChatGPT to help me. And I would feed ChatGPT the job description, the LinkedIn bios of the people you are interviewing with, like as much information as possible, and be like, help me come up with culture questions. And then like keep reiterating that until you come up with a short list. You're not going to have time to ask 10, but maybe you have a short list of five. The other thing I also really like about values is like asking questions about like what happens when people make mistakes, what happens when things don't go as planned, like basically taking a negative question because bad stuff happens, like mistakes happen in the workplace and seeing how they react. So just just more food for thought. But yeah, I think AI is also helpful with those lists and if you're struggling on like where to start with it.
Totally. And I love the tip of feeding the LinkedIn profiles and the job description because they can really hone in on that customized lead in. Like you said, like I saw your value of ABC is a top
Yeah.
one. Can you expand on whatever? So that's great. Let's actually talk about if you're an employer candidate. So outside of bringing all those thoughtful questions, which Lauren already spoke to, the other thing I would do is get clear on your own values, even within your larger life. So I think we've talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but it's been a minute. Whenever I do larger career pivots with people and they're thinking about a bigger change, I always challenge them to zoom out and think about their values as it relates to their ideal life so that you can structure your life and then think, okay, how is my career going to back into this versus making career the center and then trying to piece your life around it. If you don't have a values exercise that you love, I have one that I've definitely shared on the pod, but if you haven't taken it yet, you can find me on Instagram. I'll put my handle in the show notes and just DM me values, and I will send you my favorite one that I have all my clients take. Because once you are clear on what really matters to you, then it becomes easier to filter out companies, leaders, and see where the match is. And my favorite question that I do give all my clients for interviews, specifically for culture, that I'll add to Lauren's list of ideas too, is as a leader on the team, what is a shared trait or skill you've noticed all the top performers possess? The reason I love this question so much is it forces someone to pick one thing, and what they choose is so telling. Whether it's like collaboration, creativity, is it people that just grind it out and pedal to the metal? Okay, that tells you something about the culture, and how does that line up with your values or priorities right now? So that's a favorite.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Everyone take note of that. Love it.
Perfect. I'll know we're gonna split our third one, but Lauren, I'll let you kick it off.
Okay, cool. So prediction number three for 2026 is that the burden of appropriately, quote, leveraging AI will fall on leadership. So our final prediction comes from a McKinsey report, and naturally, AI had to make this list for the third year in a row, we might add. However, the focus is a little different than in past years. So while AI is continuing to be the hottest topic, this specific prediction is really focused on the responsibility leadership is bearing when it comes to fully utilizing and fully communicating the intent of AI. So obviously, individual contributors are still expected to use and adapt to AI, but the burden to fully, quote, crack the code on organizational changes are tied to AI is naturally going to land on the leaders. So McKinsey calls it AI stewardship. And I really love that framing. And Marnie, I'll let you take over to kind of talk about what that looks like at a company level.
Yeah, we have three different signs that we expect it to manifest through at that deeper company level. The first is leaders will need EQ more than ever. We talked about this last year too, not to resist AI, but to find a way to integrate it into their teams without harming human creativity. This is coming up so much right now for my clients in advertising and entertainment, like creative development in general. The balance of the efficiency while still keeping that human creative element is big. Number two, the transparency expectations are going up, specifically around how AI decisions are made, how the data is being used, what tasks will change, and whether AI will support them instead of replacing them. Obviously, that last one is everyone's big fear that gets shared a lot on the internet. So I think the more that leaders can articulate how this is a tool to improve your life and support your role rather than take it over, it'll make people feel more and more confident and ready to adopt it in a bigger way. And then last but not least, leaders must be the translators. So not necessarily the technical experts, but the ones that can confidently say, here's what this tool can do, here's what it shouldn't do, and here's how it helps us reach our goals. This production is relevant regardless of your level, though, because if you can confidently articulate how your AI knowledge is helping you excel at your role, it will position you as someone who is adaptable and open to learning as business needs evolve. I'm also seeing so many AI inspired case studies and prompts in interview processes now, even at companies that aren't necessarily AI tools. So, this is one of those things where now that it's been on the predictions list for a few years, I'm seeing employers and employees kind of expect each other to be able to articulate what that AI knowledge is rather than just talk about it at a surface level.
And I will just say, again, having just done a bunch of interviews, it wasn't my go-to question, but I had like someone I was doing the interviews with. Her go-to question to the candidates was, tell me how you're using AI at work. And I thought that was really interesting. The answers are really interesting. Some people are, it was like, oh, I work in this like really old workplace where we're not embracing AI, but here's all the ways I do it in my personal life. And then also there was the person who was like, we use this AI tool at work and here's what we're doing. I will also say, just again, because this is like the word of probably the decade, probably longer, and it's definitely very hot topic at Atlassian. We just did a big research report they did like an AI collaboration report index. And one of the things they found is that individual AI use is maybe not going to be the key to success. In fact, it's not. It's because using AI to go faster in the wrong direction is not helpful for anybody. So, like, it's really important that if you're using AI, your team is very aligned on like, this is how we are using AI. Here's how AI is helping us get to this like goal that we have set together that levels up to this other thing. So there's like this whole alignment piece. And I think we've been so focused on using AI for our own like personal productivity at work, but it's like, look, just because you were like super productive, you could be super productive on all the wrong things and be getting a ton of stuff done, but it's not stuff that makes an impact or stuff that matters. So I would just caution everybody to take one step back and be like, how does what I'm working on always, no matter what tools you're using to help you do that, but how is what I'm working on going to level up to these like team objectives, to these bigger like team goals and OKRs, whatever your company sets. I think that's something that I constantly have to like kind of like check myself with. I'm like, okay, wait, is this important? Does this matter? And those are changing probably too. Like the days of kind of setting annual goals and then they don't change, that's gone. So, you are going to have this constant check-in with your manager, with your team, et cetera. But that was something we found at Atlassian in the research. And I thought it was really interesting that team AI use is actually probably more valuable than your individual use, but that's going to be a different learning curve that I think will come out of this. And I think that AI stewardship, that's one of the things it's going to start to talk about or push or ask questions around is how is the team using this tool? So
Mhm.
anyway, you
Yeah, which
know,
requires that deeper understanding too, to actually learn how to collaborate with each other. It's like we've all been trying to almost like not pretend, but everyone's a little insecure, I think, about their depth of AI knowledge. And so then we're all chatting about it at a high level, but at some point we got to go deep and figure out how to mesh it together, you know?
yeah. And I think at the end of the day, AI is like any other tool that we're using to get the work done and being clear on what the work is, why it matters, and like like all of
Mhm.
that stuff like kind of doesn't change. It's funny how like even if we introduce AI, sure, but now we're using AI to do this task so that we're able to do this. Like I think that that's like the personal part that we've heard a lot about, and I'm hoping in 2026 we're gonna start hearing how like teams are using AI, how they're sharing AI knowledge, how they are using it to hit their goals together. Again, sort of because when you think about it, moving faster in the wrong direction is not actually helpful for anybody. So I'm really curious how like now that AI isn't brand new, I would love to be like, okay, can we rein it in a little bit and like get some like actual like more clear it's felt like kind of like fear mongering, like if you're not using AI, you're gonna lose your job. And now I would like us to get to a place of like AI is here. It's just part of your everyday workday, kind of like when email probably started, like, and here's what we do with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like clear expectations. Yeah, even like KPIs and stuff around it, I think would be helpful to also level the playing field just so there's not that secrecy aspect of like AI matters, but how are we
Yeah.
all actually using it? No, I love that call out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you again for listening to our very first 3 and 30 of the new year. If you have any follow-up questions from today's conversation, don't ever hesitate to reach out. And you can also reach out to us about future episode ideas. We're always looking for them. You can reach out to us directly on Marnie's Instagram. Marnie, you will put that in the show notes, but maybe you can just tell them too.
Yeah, it's just my name, Marnie, Lemonic, Lemon, IK at the end. And I'm also on LinkedIn too. So any platform works. Lauren's just the LinkedIn queen. So hit her up there.
Yeah, I probably won't respond on Instagram. I'm sorry, you guys. I only go to one platform now, but we'll drop all of those socials in the show notes as well. And again, thank you for listening to this episode of the Career Contessa podcast. Please take your time to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. It's the number one way that you can support our show so we can be back here each week with amazing guests, including Marnie.